All right, let's get started. So, I'm very delighted to be speaking to you all. I understand that the audience for this nursing dialogue, are coming from different countries and regions. And also, I understand that a lot of you in the audience listening are actually working clinically as nurses. So that's really, really positive about in terms of the interest with regards to this topic today. So the title of my presentation is Beyond the Lab, Time to Implement the Evidence. So firstly, I think you know that Nursing Dialogue is hosted by the School of Nursing, and we are proudly, um, a world leading nursing school, and we've been doing so well in our ranking in terms of QS and Shanghai ranking. And we thank you all, especially our clinician and our colleagues who are connecting today, for your help and your contribution to PolyU School of Nursing. Um, in PolyU, we also have the JBI Center, which Professor Young mentioned that I am the director. So for those of you who are not familiar with JBI is a global collaboration network. And in Hong Kong, we are the only JBI in Hong Kong hosted in PolyU SN. And what JBI does is actually conducting systematic review. We also do training, and we also do evidence implementation, which is a really huge part of the work that we're doing at JBI, and looking into evaluation of implemented policies and guidelines in the clinical practice. So that's JBI. We're part of this global collaboration. So let's go straight to my topic this afternoon. So from the title itself, Beyond the Lab, Time to Implement the Evidence, I'll be talking about the importance of research translation. I think most of us here in the audience understand the importance of research and why we need to do research, right? Especially for those colleagues who are researchers in the room, we are very aware why we need to do research. It's not just like because we are passionate about something, but it's something that we really want to know, answer the questions that we have, but at the same time, we want this to be translated in practice and be used in practice or in policy. So, but there is that whole importance of research translation. Now, together with that, I will talk about evidence implementation, because I know some of you might be doing research for a long time, or some of you in the audience may haven't done any research, but you're wanting to use evidence based from research. How can you implement that? So I'll be talking about that. What are the core principles and framework, and what are the practical steps and tools that will be useful for you to implement evidence? So, understanding the research gap. Before anything else, I know for those who have been listening to my talk for many times, I always show this slide, but bear with me. I always ask the question, how long does it take for evidence to be applied in routine practice? So for example, if we know something that is very effective, we know something that works, how long do you think it takes for this evidence to be applied in routine practice? What I mean by routine practice is, something that is used regularly in practice. Do you have any guess? May I ask the audience, how long do you think it will take for evidence to be implemented in routine practice? You can chat you can type your answers in the chat box, right? Few years, okay? Well, the answer probably, but everybody would agree it is not overnight and it is not quick, right? It takes an average around 17 years. And only 1 in 5 evidence-based intervention make it to routine clinical practice. So which means what happened to the other 4 EBPs? And it's taking that long, 17 years. Now, there is an article published in JAMA, and from this article, the authors argued that, implementation of evidence takes a long time. And I always like to show this photo in my presentation, because this is what happens to knowledge. We generate knowledge. You may have research right now, and you think this research is working. Your intervention is effective. It is no doubt it will work, but it will take some time, around 10 to 17 years actually, to actually make it as a routine practice that everybody will use it, everybody is confident about it, everybody is willing to apply it. And why is that? Because implementation is complex. Okay? It's not just, oh, I found one day you found out that your intervention is very effective. I want all the nurses to use this tomorrow. We cannot do that. And even in Hong Kong, even if people would follow whatever regulations or guidelines, it's not easy to do that because there are a lot of factors that would affect implementation. Now, only 14% of the research findings are implemented in clinical or in various settings. And there's a gap of 17 years. And what happens in this gap? The impact of the gap is it leads to missed health improvements, it leads to wasted resources, and of course, we do not improve patient care or anything that you want to improve. Because just imagine that 17 years gap. If you have a 1-year-old child born today, then it will be 17 years after the kid is already a teenager before you can see this thing happening in practice. That's a long time. So we need to reduce that gap. So implementation is not just about doing research or knowing or locating the evidence. It's about practical real-world settings, okay? It's also about what are the steps in order you can do this. So when you apply something, you need to ask the questions, who will use this? Who will adopt? And if they use this, how are they gonna use it? Like adaptation. And if they're gonna use it for how long? Sustainability. This is not just about, okay, I finished my PhD and I present 3 conferences, I disseminated it, and that's it. I have actually disseminated evidence. That's not implementation, right? And it is iterative, meaning to say there is back and forth process. You know, you cannot make it perfect the first time. You need to modify over and over. And that's why implementation science is very important. I know some of you might have heard of the term implementation science, knowledge transfer, implementation, evidence implementation, and all of that. But this falls under the whole umbrella and argument of implementing evidence. These are the studies of methods and the strategies to promote systematic uptake of research findings. This is complex because, as you know, we might have produced this very good thing, like intervention, like the one in the picture. You have a round square intervention, but then it doesn't fit into and you have a square one, but it doesn't fit into the round hole. So it's a square peg in a round hole, as they say. It's not gonna work. And it has a lot of factors, people's behavior, resources, and everything. That's why if you become an implementation scientist, okay, it's not just about knowing about your research. It's about how you're gonna implement your research findings. So if you want to have any resources or want to look into resources for implementation science, there are a lot of resources. For example, at JBI, our colleagues from the Adelaide University published this article by Craig Lockwood. So it's about background of implementation science. And recently, at the Journal of Advanced Nursing, I led a special issue together with my colleagues here in PolyU and from the University of Pennsylvania. We had a special issue on nursing implementation science in nursing. So if you want to look into that issue, that would be also very helpful on what are examples of nurse-led studies that actually contributed to implementation. So it's in Jan. Anyway, so why do we need to move towards evidence implementation in healthcare? I think this is a very important question. I know most of you, some of you are postgraduate students here listening. Some of you are clinicians. Now, in research, as you know, the gold standard of evidence generation is randomized controlled trial. There's no doubt for that, right? In the pyramid of evidence, RCTs. You have an intervention group that you test. You have the control group that you compare it against and see if the intervention really leads A to B. That's very clear cut. There's no doubt. But the question is, how long are you going to be doing RCTs on the same topic, on the same subject? You know, I've got PhD students coming to me and saying, I want to do an RCT. And I always ask the question, why? Is there no RCTs elsewhere in the world about it? And they say, yes, there's a lot, but it hasn't been done in Hong Kong. Or I want to do a pilot RCT. And I said, like, why? So these kind of things. Why am I pointing this out? Because for how long are we going to do trials if we know the intervention is working? No, this is what we call research waste. And there is a very good article about this. Like medical research keeps doing trials, but eventually we know that the thing is effective, the intervention is effective, but still doing that kind of wastage in resources and everything. Now, the Lancet series in the 2009, they publish a paper and they look into medical research. 85% of medical research is wasted. Why? Well, some of this we address very low priority questions, questions that, we already know the answer. Like when you look at the results, even if you're not doing research, you would know the answer, right? So, for example, things like if there's no adequate nutrition or not adequate exercise or anything, it would lead to poor health. Who needs to research that? That's already established. But we still see a lot of research around that area. And I have other examples coming up soon. Now, important outcomes are not assessed. We focus on very, surrogate outcomes, those outcomes that are not really important. Clinicians and patients are not involved in the research. It's always the researcher, and then they didn't look into the clinical environment. That's one way. Second, appropriate design and methods. This is what I'm saying. We keep doing RCTs, but we lack implementation. Or if we do RCT, we do not have implementation plan for sustainability, right? Remember, when you do randomized controlled trials or any trials, it's a very controlled environment. You have control with your subjects and whoever in the research, what happens in the real world. So this is really important. It doesn't work in the real world, research waste. Accessible to full publication. Another thing that the Lancet findings tell us is there is a bias in reporting studies. So over 50% of the studies never published in full, which means we only get to know the ones that are published, but those ones, particularly with insignificant results, are not published. So this is publication bias. Like we keep testing things because we never get to read that those didn't work. You know what I mean? So for example, if there's an intervention over time that we know that is working, then that's great. But if there are interventions that we keep asking why, we have to test it, but we did not know previous research that there has been some studies, but they were never published. And of course, unbiased reporting. So these are all contributing to research waste. Remember, this is the pyramid of evidence, and it's very important to recognize that RCTs and systematic reviews are on top of this. And we have to do this properly in order to generate evidence. So I have here a metaphor that I found. So now instead of being so obsessed in conducting RCTs on something that we already know is effective, what do we need to do? We need to start thinking about implementation. Okay. Now I use this picture here is because I don't know if you've noticed, this is from the fairy tale. I don't know if you know, like Snow White. The Snow White story has a witch there, right? The queen. She keeps asking the mirror if she's beautiful. Of course, the mirror would say she's beautiful because she's beautiful, right? That's the same with us. We keep testing things that we know are effective, and we keep doing and doing all of these things and wasting our resources. So, why there is no longer need for another RCT? Things to consider. Saturation of evidence, okay? Once multiple high-level quality RCTs have been done, then look at those evidence, okay? Look at, look at the recommendations. The evidence practice gaps. Strong evidence doesn't always lead to routine use due to practical barriers. So you need to look into that. Resource allocation. RCTs are costly, okay? Shifting focus to implementation is the next thing to do. And then ethical consideration. we keep randomizing patients to inferior treatments over and over again. That's unethical. You cannot do that. We already know that it's working. Why do you have to torture people again? So these are just some of the examples. Um, for example, hand hygiene in healthcare. We know the effectiveness for this, right? So proven to reduce healthcare associated infections. I don't want to read another RCT about hand hygiene. But then what will be the focus? Improving staff compliance in order to implement hand hygiene, because we know staff has poor compliance rate for hand hygiene. Smoking cessation interventions. We know smoking cessation works. Those interventions that we know over time. But then, in terms of access and uptake, especially with underserved population, is a challenge. So we focus on implementation. Early mobilization in ICU patients, we know that this is effective. So we need to look into how do we implement overcoming the staffing, the cultural issues, and other issues that relate to it. Vaccination programs, we know that it's effective, but implementation-wise, it's difficult because there's a lot of factors to it. Addressing hesitancy, delivery, and all of that. Pressure injury. So these are just some of the examples. So the message here that I would like to point out at this part of my talk is we need to look beyond the lab and the testing. And in order to do that, we need to see and look around if there's has been an established evidence of these interventions, and then how can we implement it instead of doing another trial or doing another whatsoever just for the sake of doing research. So the question now is how to implement. So I keep saying here implementation. So you might ask me, then Jed, how do you implement? Okay. So there are key concepts. Okay. So when you look around your practice settings, especially the nurses work in the room, like, when you look around in your ward, in your unit, or if you're working in the university, when you look at your teaching methods, your delivery and everything, do you always feel like that there's something that needs improvement? That's the first question that I would like you to think about. And I'm sure without taking so much time, you can think in 1 or 2, 3 seconds that there are something that needs to be improved. So you would think, but then one should start thinking, do you have any proof or data to show what you're feeling is valid? Like, if you think that there are things that needs to be improved or evidence needs to be implemented in order to improve something, is there any proof or data to show that these are valid? Okay? Or if you don't have any data, what is it? It's not scientific. What are you doing? You're just complaining. So it has to have data. It has to have objectivity to it. And then you ask the question, how can you improve practice? What are the issues of concern? Do you need more trustworthy evidence for best practice? Okay, like EBP. Or if the evidence is available, how can you implement the evidence? Because for sometimes, like in the clinical world, for clinicians, for our colleagues who are in the clinical environment, you think this intervention or this approach is really the best thing to do. But then you don't know, is there any guideline about it? Or is there any research that backs it up? So you need to start thinking about this. Is there any data or is there any EBP available for this? So if you need more trustworthy evidence for best practice because there's nothing, then what will you do? You need to review the literature. And that's why systematic review is very important. If you do not do systematic reviews, then you need to learn or appreciate how to read systematic reviews and what are the findings of systematic reviews. And then if there are gaps, do research to produce EBP. You can do another RCT if there's a real gap. No problem. So implementing evidence, if the evidence is available, what will you do? Implement the evidence. So here we are now. However, there is some confusion. Okay, so once and for all, I want to clarify this in this talk because sometimes when I talk about implementation science or evidence implementation, there's a lot of confusion around. So we have evidence as clinicians, but we don't want to do research because we're not researchers, we're clinicians. And sometimes the researchers would say, we don't have evidence, or we have evidence, but then we want to do implement. But we don't want to do it in a way that in just one setting. We want it broader or across settings. We want to do implementation science research. So there is some confusion. There's two things here. There could be evidence implementation, that you can implement the evidence. And there's also evidence implementation through QI, or quality improvement projects. So two things. Most researchers will do implementation projects using implementation science research. Most clinicians, or working in the field, wherever, will do quality improvement projects applying the principles of evidence implementation. I hope you're following me here, okay? Because sometimes there is a disconnect. You know, I am a researcher, I work in a university, and then when I go to the wards or in the clinics, and when I talk about research, no one's interested doing research, because that's wrong approach. The implementation in the clinical environment is not about doing type 1, type 2, type 3 hybrid implementation design. The implementation, if they want to improve practice, is doing quality improvement by implementing evidence. But as a researcher, I want to know what are the strategies and the methods. Then I do implementation research. Let's get this clarified. So before anything else, there are concepts. So there's two things here. There's efficacy, effectiveness, and implementation. So efficacy is the performance in the lab in ideal conditions, right temperature, right setting, right everything, clinical trial results. Effectiveness is when you use the intervention in the real world settings, with people, with systems. So that's the effectiveness, like a community health program. Implementation is how will you adopt and sustain this intervention, like training staff and adapting workflows. So remember this. So are you dealing with efficacy? They're doing the trial. If you're doing effectiveness, it could be a trial, but more on how it works in the real world. And then if you're doing implementation science, then you look into the factors that will enable it to be implemented. So do you really need to do implementation science research, or using hybrid methodology? Or do you need to do a QI project? So this is a question. For researchers, we do hybrid effectiveness implementation designs, then that's fine, because that's academic exercise. For clinicians, do not be put off when we say evidence implementation, because you can do QI implementation studies. Okay. So there's a lot of people asking me this. What is the difference between type 1, type 2, type 3? So this is it. Okay. As a researcher, or in research, particularly postgraduate students who are listening here right now, when you're doing an effectiveness implementation design type 1, your primary focus is the clinical effectiveness, okay? The secondary focus is implementation. So in other words, it's like doing a pilot RCT or an RCT actually with some implementation outcomes. You get what I mean? For example, testing a new diabetes management program's impact on blood sugar control while collecting data on how clinicians adapt the program. So the implementation part is secondary, but you're really wanting to know if the diabetes management program is working or effective. So that's type 1. Type 2 is both. Your clinical effectiveness and your implementation is your focus, okay? So testing both the clinical intervention and the effectiveness and what are the implementation strategies. So there's a balance. Type 3 is more of the implementation strategy. And the secondary outcome is the clinical effectiveness. So when you're doing type 3, you're not looking at, is this effective or not effective? You need to be convinced, and you need to know that the intervention is already effective. You're just trying to find out if it's really applicable in the real world and what are the strategies to make it applicable. I hope this is clear. If you have any questions with this, we will have another workshop in the future which will look into this specific methodologies. But quality improvement, which probably more relatable to our clinician colleagues in the room, these are QI projects that actually uses implementation science to actually answer questions about implementation. So Many implementation science studies use QI methods as part of the research, and this is what is needed in practice. So here's the difference. Okay. If you're doing implementation research, you want generalizable knowledge about implementation strategies. But if it's a QI project, you achieve measurable improvement in a specific local setting. So for those master students listening to this talk, I know at the end of your course, you probably have a clinical project or a practicum or somehow. A lot of these are quality improvement projects with evidence implementation principles, right? So don't really apply an implementation science research on that because you have EBP or evidence that you want to implement. So it's basically following a QI framework. The scope of implementation research is multi-site. Quality improvement is probably can be single site. And the intervention status for an implementation research is to focus on best to implement, while the QI is to focus improve delivery locally. Okay? And there's all of this here. I will share there will be a recording for this so you can have a look later. But basically, here's an example. Studying which strategy best increases guideline adherence across hospitals, or a QI of improving hand hygiene compliance in a single ward. So are there frameworks when you're doing implementation research or QI or evidence implementation? Are there frameworks? Yes. There's a lot of framework out there. And it depends on the question, it depends on the objective of what you're gonna use. But at JBI, okay, this is the JBI model of evidence-based healthcare. As you can see here, this is evidence generation, synthesis, transfer. This is the implementation part. The implementation part has 7-phase approach to implementation. Okay, and that's what I'm going to talk about in the next 10 minutes. So what are the approach to implement evidence? So phase 1 is identifying the practice area or the problem. Where is the problem? Where is the research question or the gap or the clinical issue? Second is engagement with change agents or the team who are going to be involved. The phase 3 is the assessment of the context and the readiness to change. Like sometimes you want to implement something, right? But it's very hard because people in the ward or in your area where you're working, they will not use it. They're not ready. So context analysis is really important and readiness for change because you can never implement things when people are not going to adopt it. But what are the reasons why people do not adopt or do not change? Because they're not trained for it. So we'll talk about that. Phase 4 is review of the practice evidence criteria against the evidence, and then implement using GRIP. I'll talk about what is GRIP. And then phase 6 and 7 are reassessment of practice and sustainability of interventions. So for identifying what are the framework for initial planning, you need to use the P's. What is the P's? The P's is the problem, the issue, and then what is the intervention you're wanting to implement, and then how you're going to evaluate it. What is the context? Is it hospital, ward, clinic, multiple hospitals? How many hospitals? And then how will you engage? The engagement is very, very important. Who will be impacted? Just imagine you have a new system. This is very effective in Canada, for example, or very effective in the US. You bring that system here in Hong Kong. People will not use it because it disrupts people's routine in terms of their work. It is extra work. Is it extra training? So you need to engage from the very beginning in terms of engagement. So this is one of the framework for the initial planning. So when you identify the practice area or the problem, you need to understand whose problem is it. Okay? As a researcher, we always do research. I do research with hospital authority, with community partners. The problem is not mine. I don't have that problem. It is their problem, right? Meaning to say, they come, we talk about what are their experiences and what are the issues that they have, that it becomes a problem, and that's something that needs to be solved. or there is a gap in the service that needs to be filled in. So it is very important that when you're implementing, or for us researchers to think about something that is a gap, how big is it? Is there any harm or quality improvement measures affected? And what does the evidence say about the solution? Sometimes we're very good at pointing out the problem. But what I always ask whenever we have the phase one, what I always ask with evidence implementation is, okay, we know the problem. What have you been doing about it? Was there any solutions that you have been doing in order to solve the problem? If it's a very new problem, then that's fine. But if that's the problem that has been going for over a long time, so something must have been done in order to contain, to sustain, to keep patients alive, even that problem has existed for a long time. And then we look into the literature. What are the things that you can find in the literature that actually talks about solutions? So you define your problem, high cost, high frequency. Why is this a problem? It's very important. Who was impacted with the problem? So the message here is, if it's a problem, it should be a real problem, okay? It is supported by data. As I've said earlier, if you don't have data, you're just complaining. No proof, no evidence, no implementation. Number two, phase two, engage change agents. Who needs to be involved? So in research, this is also very important because you need to know who will be involved. Who are the nurses, the clinicians, who will be the people who will be receiving the intervention. But then in implementation, particularly with QI projects, you need to, who are your key opinion leaders? Who is the coach, the champion? It has to be organized beforehand. Okay, I think this is very understandable. Who will be affected positively or negatively? Who are the official that actually approves the project is very, very important. That's why when I always say this, when some nurses have very brilliant ideas, and then they come to JBI and they want us to help with their project, I always ask the question like, does your GM or your ward or HA or the community or your CEO know about this? Because if it's a good idea, the organization will support. But if it's a good idea without organizational support, it just remains as a good idea and nothing will happen. So that's very, very important in implementation, the buy-in. Three, very important, assess the context and the readiness for change. You cannot implement something on people that never have the realization that they need to change practice. Okay, you might have nurses there working for 20 years and you challenge them with the new intervention or new research, and they will just say, I've been nursing for like 35 years and I don't want to change. So assessment of context and readiness for change is really, really important. You need to look at outer context, inner context, and local context. And most of the time, the resistance is because people are not trained for it, or there's not enough information to actually, implement or adopt the intervention. So you need to do context analysis, okay? Do not, overwhelm, but it needs to have, what are the issues, why people are, very comfortable in this practice, and why can't they change? So there are questions like, how can you do it? So you can do questionnaire surveys, you can do qualitative interviews, you can do focus groups, observation, or SWOT analysis, strength, weakness, opportunities, all of those. And you can use a lot of assessment tools for that. Now, this is the interesting part. I know a lot of the researchers in the room will be looking for this, You will be asking me, oh, so Jed, what about REAIM? What about CIFR? What about whatever, PDSA, Paris model? Of course, you can use these models in research, okay? These are the models. For example, REAIM, very popular, Everybody talks about REAIM. So it's about the reach. How many people are, have received, or the target population participating in the intervention, the efficacy or the effectiveness, the adoption. So you can use this framework as a model or a guide in order, particularly with your evaluation. So what is the most important when you're assessing context? Is change possible? Is the culture receptive? Are staff prepared? That's why when I'm working with projects with the hospital authority, a very large component of their evidence implementation is training. So some of you might be working in HA, and some of you might have been, might have come across in some other projects that we have implemented. For example, the implementation of the Glasgow Coma Scale 2014 in the HA. There's a big part of that is training sessions. So I was working with some colleagues in the HA headquarters about this. And a huge part of that is training. Nurses needs to be trained in order how to use it so that they will apply and implement. 4, review the practice against evidence-based criteria. So this is now when you need to, if you implemented it, what is your EBP or what is evidence-based practice? How can you say that it's wrong or it's correct? Okay, so you need to have an EBP guide or a criteria to say that, for example, simple things like hand washing. How will you know that the hand washing technique is correct? So it has to be against evidence-based criteria. If there's no evidence-based criteria, it has to be created so that we will know that we're checking it against good practice. So audit is one thing. Feedback. I know the nurses listening are very good at this. Audit and feedback. For research, I will touch on the researchers part later. But basically in clinical practice, this is what is done. So for example, recommended practices. Patients should be screened for delirium risk, and then the audit criteria is a delirium screening risk is conducted upon patient's initial presentation to ICU. Yes or no? Very simple, very straightforward. Because this is where you need to know if the implementation has been carried out or the intervention has been implemented with fidelity, right? This is fidelity checking. Like when I say fidelity, is it correctly or accurately implemented? Phase 5 is implement change to practice using GRIP. So, getting research into practice, that's GRIP. So how do we change practice? So how do we know the strategies to implement? So you need to get into what are the barriers. So the barriers is really linked to the audit criteria. And then the enablers is also linked to the audit criteria and determine what are these barriers. I'll talk about barriers later. And the strategies, it has to fit and to actually, it's not one size fit all. You have to know what, who, and where, and how can you properly implement. So there are many strategies to promote evidence implementation. There's reminders, audit, consensus, patient-mediated, opinion leaders, financial incentives, education, and all of those. 6 is reassessing practice. How will I know that it made a difference? Did we apply the knowledge? Did we improve the practice? Did we improve the system? Did we improve health outcomes? And the evaluation. This is very important. Like, how did you know that the processes have changed and the structure and all of those? So these are just some of the slides. I will not, go through it really quickly, but the last phase is sustainability. Okay? How will you keep it going? Who's gonna sustain when the implementation period has finished? So this is really, really important. And who should you reassess? And then if you've got sustainability, then you talk about scaling up. How can you apply this to other settings? So audits is very important every 6 months and all. So I'm going straight to an example. I know some of you are asking for an example for an implementation science study. Okay. So the HMRF, some of you who are researchers in the room, HMRF, the Health Medical Research Fund of Hong Kong, they have a section or a criteria, a category in the application known as implementation science. And implementation science is one of the streams wherein the studies submitted to this are implementation science studies. So I'll give you my study as an example. So I have a project entitled Dyadic Management Intervention in Older People with Co-occurring Cognitive Impairment and Diabetes as a Supplementary Approach to CDS-MP chronic disease self-management program, a hybrid effectiveness implementation studies. So this study was scored 4/4, which is I'm very happy, and funded by the HMRF. What is the significance of the topic? Okay, now CDSMP is a very well-established intervention. This was developed by the Stanford University in the early 90s. So there are interventions. I mean, this is a self-management intervention for chronic conditions such as diabetes. So it's very well known. It's working. But then a lot of the studies that has been undertaken is in people with no problems with cognition, mean to say they're okay mentally and cognitively. However, my study looked into what about there is co-occurrence with the aging population and everything. Will CDSMP still work when we apply this to people with diabetes plus memory impairment or mild cognitive impairment or even dementia? So that was my main argument in this project. Now, CDSMP or self-management is based on self-efficacy theory. So when you manage your own diabetes, that means you're able to manage it, right? That's self-efficacy. But to me, I argue that when someone has memory problems, they rely a lot to their from their caregivers. So I shifted the paradigm and the narrative from self-efficacy to dyadic efficacy, meaning to say involvement of the caregivers. So I know that CDSMP works. I don't need to do another RCT. What do I need to do is to do an implementation science study. So several clinical trials prove it's effective. So I asked the question, is this still effective on particular population? And can it be implemented in Hong Kong? Okay. So I use REAIM, yeah, very popular REAIM. But then I also use other framework such as Proctor's taxonomy, where I look into implementation cost or cost effectiveness. So if you're gonna ask me, you have REAIM there, you have implementation. So these are the implementation outcomes. When you're doing implementation science studies, you really want to know what are the implementation outcomes. So the question is, you need to have a measure or a way to measure acceptability. So I have a questionnaire for acceptability and adoption. I have a questionnaire for appropriateness. I have a method for fidelity and feasibility. I have a question about implementation costs. So there's a lot. There's a survey, there's a qualitative study, there is an audit. This is implementation science. That's why it's complex. Okay? So you do apply those framework. I'm towards the end now of my presentation. And you need to look into what are the outcomes, the adoption measures, feasibility, fidelity, and the cost effectiveness. And what are the tools? So when you're doing implementation science studies, it's not just doing the RCT or the effectiveness side, especially when you're doing hybrid, okay? You have to have other measures, surveys from nurses in terms of how do they think about the intervention, focus groups and qualitative interviews of how did the intervention go, interviewing patients, what do they think about the intervention being implemented? Managers, do you think they can still sustain and fund this intervention in the next 10 years? That's why implementation plan is really important. For those who are applying grants, you know that in your grant application, they always ask about implementation and sustainability. Because after the research, what are you going to do? Beyond the lab, what are you going to do? So these are some of the takeaway from this. And I really hope that this is beneficial to everyone in terms of giving you an insight what evidence implementation is. And these are the barriers and facilitators where are quite obvious, insufficient time, funding, communication needs to be improved, and needs clear updates within the process. And these are some of the strategies: building champions, education, and it has to fit to local needs. So if there is time for you to co-design or to co-create, then do it. If there is funding for it in the project that you can actually involve patients and the consumers in the process, then do it, because that will really have an impact in your implementation. So takeaways: Implementation science links research to real-world practice. Remember, evidence might be very good, but it is a different story when you apply it. Okay? The key factors for success is you need to know context, stakeholder engagement, effective planning, and balanced adaptation. It needs to be monitored so that it is sustainable. And after all, for healthcare professionals like for us, we look into how did it improve patient outcomes. So that's all for my presentation today. And if you have any questions, my email is here. And if you are interested in availing the workshops that we offer, JBI Hong Kong, feel free to reach out, and we also will send some announcement if there are any workshops in the future. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm very happy to answer any questions, clarifications that you might have.